Welcome everyone today. Today we will consider the nomination of Dr. Arthi Prabhakar to be the Director of the Office of Science and Technology. Please, if you would join us at the table. Dr. Prabhakar, I welcome you and your family, and I'm sure you'll have a chance to introduce them. The position to which you have been nominated is charged with advising the President on a broad range of scientific and technological policies to address national problems. We are at a critical moment when science and innovation has never been more important to our nation's health and economic competitiveness. And for the first time in our history, President Biden has elevated this position to a cabinet-level post, underscoring its significance and the administration's commitment to ensuring that our nation continues to be on the cutting edge of new developments that can improve the lives of all Americans. Your credentials and accomplishments and your personal story set you apart as a true trailblazer. You are an engineer, applied physicist, pioneer and skilled manager, and you have led 2 federal research and development agencies and worked with startups, large companies, universities, government labs, nonprofits across a wide variety of sectors to create powerful new solutions for our critical challenges. Under Dr. Prabhakar's leadership, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency prototyped a system for directing nuclear and radiological material before a terrorist can build a bomb, developed tools to find human trafficking networks in deep and dark webs, and enabled complex military systems to work together even when they are not originally designed to do so. She created a new office to spur novel biotechnologies, which kickstart the development of rapid response mRNA vaccine platform, making possible the fastest, safest, and effective vaccine development in the world in response to COVID-19. At 34, Dr. Prabhakar became the first woman to lead the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And while there, she took both the Manufacturing Extension Partnership and the Advanced Technological Partner Program to a national scale to boost competitiveness and in our small and medium-sized manufacturing base. She spent years in Silicon Valley helping to translate R&D into deployment, a big subject around here, how to move more translational science. Then in 2019, she founded a nonprofit to develop solutions to challenges of climate and health and to open access for every person to have opportunities in the sciences. We are simultaneously facing our challenges on the response from a global pandemic, experiencing daily effects of our challenging and changing climate, and we are on the cusp of discoveries that we need to meet the challenges facing our nation. Science has never been more important, and Dr. Prabhakar is absolutely, I believe, the right person to lead this agency. She's exactly the kind of inspirational leader we need to make progress on the growing need to have more women participating in science and across technical workforce needs. I'm also confident she's the right person to work with us on implementing USICA, the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. While the United States is a leader in scientific and technological innovation, we have fallen short of consistently recruiting, retaining, and promoting women and diverse individuals in the STEM field. In my state, Washington has a thriving technology, aerospace, and biotechnology sectors and space sectors. Our success as a state would not be possible without those contributions of women in our science and engineering fields. But in order to continue that success, we need to have even more women in science. We need more diversity in science. So addressing the gender, racial, and ethnic disparities in STEM needs to be a national priority. USICA also requires the Office of Science and Technology Policy to develop policy guidelines to ensure that federal research agencies improve outreach to minority-serving institutions and improve their research and competitiveness. It requires efforts to reduce sex-based and sexual harassment involving recipients of federal research awards. USICA requires the director to establish an interagency working group to ensure that coordination among federal agencies and activities in key technology areas, which are vital to the U.S., continue to see leadership by the United States on a global basis. These are areas like artificial intelligence, quantum science, cybersecurity, biotechnology, and other leading-edge technologies. Amen. And so these agencies are going to have to submit to Congress a comprehensive national science and technology strategy. So that's a lot of work to do, but we're up to the task, and you certainly, Dr. Prabhakar, are up to the task. So look forward to hearing your opening statement and the question and answer period with our colleagues. I will now turn to my colleague, Senator Wicker, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Senator. Because the air conditioner isn't working very well, and I've taken my coat off. On the other hand, today's confirmation hearing for Dr. Arthi Prabhakar to be Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy recognizes her distinguished career in both the public and private sectors, including as head of DARPA and NIST. The vacancy at OSTP resulted from the resignation of its previous director. A White House investigation concluded that Dr. Eric Lander engaged in bullying and intimidation of subordinates, and his behavior contributed to a toxic work culture at OSTP. This issue was raised and dismissed at first, but then verified. If confirmed, and I expect she will be, Dr. Prabhakar's first job will be making sure that everyone at OSTP is treated with fairness and dignity, and that workplace standards are met. I look forward to hearing how she plans to chart a new course for the future of OSTP. Improving OSTP's work culture will also require preventing any improper outside influence on a government agency. A Politico report from March of this year detailed the outsized role played by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt during Mr. Lander's tenure as OSTP director. We should applaud philanthropy in the service of scientific progress, but there's something unseemly about a well-connected billionaires foundation reportedly paying the salaries of OSTP staff and consultants indirectly. I expect Dr. Prabhakar would want to comment on this. Given her business ties with Eric Schmidt, I hope she can assure the committee that she'll avoid conflicts of interest and undue outside influence over the nation's scientific agenda or the appearance thereof. The OSTP director plays a critical role in advising the president on scientific, engineering, and technological aspects of a wide range of federal government activity. The director also coordinates science and technology policy across all federal agencies. This position has become all the more significant after having been designated by the president to cabinet level. So I want to thank Dr. Prabhakar for her commitment to public service, for meeting with us prior to this hearing, and for appearing before us today. I expect this hearing will be informative and useful to the committee. Thank you, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. And before we get to you, Dr. Prabhakar, in your opening statement, we have been joined by our colleague, Senator Mark Warner, a very active member of the Intelligence Committee and very active participant in USICA, and certainly the CHIPS bill, which was authored by you and Senator Cornyn. So we welcome you this morning. Former Representative Mark Thornberry wished to also join us, but he's not able to do that, so we will submit his statement for the record. But Senator Warner, if you would like to make an introductory remark about Dr. Prabhakar.
Well, Chair Cantwell and Ranking Member Wicker and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. And let me start off and congratulate both of you on an extraordinarily strong vote last night. I know how much work you both have put in to what I think is going to be the most significant investment this nation has made literally in decades in terms of scientific research. As I know Chair Cantwell's already gone through, well beyond just CHIPS ORAN, dealing with post-5G world, but a host of areas about how we grow our workforce, how we make sure we have technology development all over the country, extraordinarily important. And let me also say, I have to acknowledge, as somebody who had the opportunity in my first, I think it was 4 years to be on this committee, I like what you've done with the room.
Thank you.
Roger, I've not been in here for a long time, so this is like a whole different look than before. So thank you again for this opportunity. And as you indicated, Chair Cantwell, thank you for the opportunity to introduce Dr. Arti Prabhakar. I got to know Dr. Prabhakar when she was head of DARPA, and institution which was, I can't think of whatever we're calling it this week. All this legislation was the very active competition the United States is engaged with in competition with China. And I think it's always important when we mention China, at least that our beef is with the Communist Party and Xi Jinping. It's not with the Chinese people or the Chinese diaspora or wherever. And one of the things that worries me is, China has laid out which technology domains they want to dominate in. And fortunately, if you come to the United States, there's one list from the Director of National Intelligence, another list from CIA, another list from the Commerce Department, a fourth list from Ostp. I think Ostp, when properly led, may be the only place that can look across all jurisdictions about where we may need to make the kind of record investments that under your leadership we will hopefully make coming out of the Senate this week. I think we've all known that recent years have demonstrated the importance of science and technology. We've got to make sure we stay up. I think we've kind of gotten, for a while, a little bit of sleep at the switch, and not only in terms of making investments, but also showing up at the standard-setting bodies. As a former telecom guy, blew me away that with Huawei, it was not only a case of China having a leading company, but it was also they were setting the standards, rules, protocols, and procedures. And OSTP, I think, could play an extraordinarily important role. Dr. Prabhakar has got clearly an extensive background. She was the first woman to receive an applied physics PhD from Caltech, the first woman to lead NIST, and if confirmed, will be the first woman of color to lead the OSTP. I know Dr. Prabhakar, after her tenure at DARPA, had gone back to California, and I think was very happily ensconced in her life back out there. And her willingness to step up and answer this call again for public service is really a benefit not only to the president, but it really is a whole benefit to the country. And I hope in her testimony today, she will be able to make that case. I recommend her very, very strongly, and appreciates the committee's courtesy to let me come by and introduce her.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Thanks for making this committee hearing this morning and for your input. And we appreciate your long relationship with Dr. Prabhakar. So we'll now turn to Dr. Prabhakar, and if you do want to introduce your family, you might do that before your statement, but again, thank you for your willingness to serve, and we welcome your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll introduce them in the course of my statement. Good morning. It's just wonderful to be here with all of you. Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Wicker, members of the committee, it's a tremendous honor to appear before you for this nomination hearing. I want to start by thanking Senator Warner for those extremely gracious remarks and the charge that he laid out. I was so pleased that Representative Thornberry had also agreed to introduce me, and as the chair mentioned, he provided a wonderful statement for the record. Loved working with both of them, and that support means a great deal to me. I'm very grateful to have a number of family members and some very close personal friends here. I have 4 cousins who flew in from different parts of the country. But among this group of supporters who are here with me today is one person who was in this room in 1993 when it was before all this refurbishment happened. That day I was here as the president's nominee to serve as director of NIST. And that day, Pat Windham was a Senate Commerce Committee staffer. He was sitting behind the chair, who was Chair Hollings at that time. So that's the old history. In August, Pat and I will have been married for 27 years. Of course, we got married during a congressional recess. And we have 2 truly wonderful daughters. They're here with us as well. They're right behind me. And Pat and my 2 daughters with him they are my North Star, and I want to take this moment to thank them for their love and their support.
Thank you.
So today, it is a tremendous honor to be here in front of this Senate Commerce Committee as President Biden's nominee to serve as Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy and as his Science and Technology Advisor, as well as a member of his cabinet. Now, in the last week and a half, I've had the pleasure of talking with a whole host of, not everyone, unfortunately, but a number of the members of this committee. And I want to thank this committee, but each of you individually as well, for the work that you've done to bolster U.S. science and technology so that it can create a better future for every American. This is my abiding passion, and it's the reason I was so grateful when the President asked me to serve as his nominee. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, you will find me to be a staunch partner in this work. I've come before you with a perspective that's shaped by service in the public and private sectors. I've had the opportunity to work in a number of companies, to be a venture capitalist for a decade. Most recently, I'm the co-founder and CEO of a nonprofit, Actuate. My public service includes leading two deeply wonderful but very different organizations that have been mentioned as well, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the mid-1990s, and then DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, 2012 to 2017. The thread that runs through this career is an aspiration to create a better future. And that is a notion that started for me with my mother, who instilled it in me. She was the person who brought our family here from India when I was only 3 years old. And this idea that we actually can create a better future was something that was reinforced for me throughout my career. I've gotten to work with amazing people at all different kinds of universities, in companies of all sorts and sizes. I've gotten to work with great people in government labs and in nonprofit labs. I've had the chance to work with people in different kinds of government agencies and different parts of government.
I need to catch up.
Together, we've had the enormous privilege of doing the work that makes it possible, that made it possible to improve our national security, to improve our economic competitiveness, and to improve the lives of many millions of Americans in every zip code in every part of our country. For many decades, American science and technology has been the most powerful engine for innovation in history. And that's an achievement that did not happen by accident. OSTP is at the heart of making sure that U.S. science and technology leadership endures in this very complex century that we're living in. I want to just finish by touching on one last matter, which is that OSTP's success will only happen if the great people in this organization are able to work in a respectful and energized environment. And along with you, I certainly saw the press reports earlier this year. They were extremely concerning. What I have seen in just my limited interactions at this point with OSTP is my impression is that Dr. Alondra Nelson, with her terrific leadership, has worked with the staff, and now the staff is setting a foundation for a respectful environment. And I do see many people who are working with great energy and excitement on their critically important goals. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed for this position, people will be my first priority. And it would be my great privilege to nurture an environment at OSTP where people wake up every morning eager to deliver on a mission that matters for our country. So thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you, and I very much look forward to your questions and thoughts today.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhakar, and again, appreciate all your work and advice during the USICA process and many comments to many members of this committee. I'm going to start with Senator Wicker and then followed by Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate it. Dr. Prabhakar, I was at a family reunion this weekend, and I'm glad this committee has an opportunity to host a family reunion today. Welcome to you all, and they seem to be enjoying themselves. I think they like each other. I was going to ask about the culture that I mentioned in In my opening statement, I think you've addressed that. And so I do appreciate it. Let's see if in 4 minutes and 27 seconds we can get in 3 topics. One is disparity of funding among the states. 2 states get 1/3 of all the NSF funding. What steps could OSTP take to spread science and technology around to some really great researchers around the nation who are just not getting that chance? Also talk about federal research security. I'm not sure we're quite where we ought to be on the proposed legislation, but FBI Director Christopher Wray said this is a real problem. And then, if you will, do comment on your understanding of the Politico story and what assurances you could give us about avoiding the appearance of conflicts of interest.
Thank you very much, Senator. Those are 3 very meaty topics. I'll start with the first one, and I've so appreciated your leadership on the EPSCoR topic and just the broader notion of making sure that we reach people across every part of our country. I was an undergraduate at Texas Tech University, and when I was there, this is now a long time ago, my hair was still black, but at that time, that university really had very, very little research funding. But for me and for a lot of the rural students that I went to school with there, the fact that there were faculty who were doing really interesting leading-edge research opened a window that really, for me, it changed my life. I worked in the laser lab there, and that opened a lot of new opportunities and a lot of new thoughts about what was possible in STEM. So I really share your conviction that we need to make sure that those pathways and the excitement of STEM and also of research are available to the kids going to these universities in all different parts of the country. If I'm confirmed, that's an area I would very much like to work with you on. Your second topic was about research security, and again, this is one of the problems that is very real in our country today. The geopolitics of the competition that we're in with China, in particular, certainly means that we have some real issues that have to be wrestled with. They need to be dealt with a clear understanding of a couple of principles. One is how important it is for the most fundamental research to be conducted in a way that's open and widely available to the research community. That's not true as you move into product development. It's not true as you move deeper into applied work, but that is something to keep in mind for the earliest stages of research. And then secondly, very much to Senator Warner's point, I think we have to be very clear about the fact that what we are concerned about is espionage and the undue taking advantage of the U.S. research base by other countries. But we don't want to turn that into we don't want to inappropriately go after individuals who are earnestly working on their research and not out of line. So I think these are some of the conflicts that people are wrestling with. I know there's been some very good work done on this subject in USICA that I hope will be able to move forward. And again, if confirmed, this is a topic that I believe is very important and one that I would very much want to work with you on. To briefly turn to your last issue, which I think is critically important as well, which is about either the fact or the appearance of conflicts of interest or undue influence. This is something that I believe is fundamental for anyone in public service or any organization that's part of the government. We simply can't do our jobs as public servants if there is either a conflict or an appearance, because even if there is an appearance, what it means is that the people we need to engage will not believe that it's a level playing field and that their ideas and that their work is being taken seriously. So I take those issues very, very seriously. As I'm sure you know very well, OSTP, back to its initial enabling legislation, was designed to have a modest budget and to tap resources from across federal agencies as well as from outside in the private sector. And that's been done very successfully. It's so integral to OSTP's mission to work with all those communities that I think it does make sense to draw from different parts. But of course, that in no way eliminates the obligation to make sure that there is no undue influence and that in fact, that there are no conflicts, no undue influence, and no appearance, to your point. So those are some of the thoughts that I will have that will be important priorities if I'm confirmed and go into that position.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I enjoyed our discussion. Doctor, I want to congratulate you on your nomination. As you and I talked about earlier, Minnesota is home to a whole lot of innovation. The Mayo Clinic, which cares for more than 1.3 million people a year. We're home to many innovative companies and given the world everything from the pacemaker to the Post-it note, as we say. So I'm pleased and look forward to working forward with you if and when you are confirmed. So I'm going to start with something actually Senator Wicker and I have worked on together, and that's rare diseases. We co-chair that caucus, and we are working to make sure that cures and treatments get out there as soon as possible. And we introduced the STAT Act recently to improve access to rare diseases by promoting intergovernmental coordination that advanced science-based policies. If confirmed, how will OSTP coordinate with other agencies on rare diseases?
Senator Klobuchar, thank you very much for that question. I greatly enjoyed our visit, and I'll note that many decades ago, I was one of the people that Mayo Clinic cared for in Rochester, Minnesota, and I remain grateful for that opportunity to go to Minnesota and come back a healthier person. I think this work that you all are engaged in on rare diseases is incredibly important. The devastation that this brings to families who are dealing with these issues is very real and something that I think we have an opportunity to do better and more. Very much to your point, I think there are opportunities to pull together strands of work in a way that can be more effective. In addition, I think some very important new initiatives that are beginning today, for example, the ARPA for Health, ARPA-H, will chart its course, but my hope is that, this might be an area that they can also contribute to. So again, if I'm confirmed, it's an area I would look forward to working with you on.
Thank you very much. Doctor, the world is literally burning right now as we see what's happening in England, across our own country, and the climate crisis was one of the key defining scientific challenges of our time. President Biden has promised to take swift action. I'm focused on, of course, bringing down greenhouse gases and being as aggressive as we can. And there's ways we can do this, as you know, that are not just working with science, investing in science, but are actually good for our economy in the long haul, because just doing nothing is not going to work. Since 1980, the United States has sustained 285 weather and climate disasters, where the overall damage costs reached or exceeded $1 billion, if we want to talk about money. In your view, what role do you see OSTP playing in helping the United States respond to climate?
Senator, this is an incredibly important topic right now. The majority of Americans are living through climate extremes. They're experiencing it. It's a very real crisis, and urgent action is needed. I've been very pleased and proud of the Biden administration's actions throughout agencies, but also with some great expertise assembled in the White House, including at OSTP. And this is an area that, if I'm confirmed, will be one of my priorities. As you mentioned, there are important things to be done right now with the new technologies and the new industries that we can continue to expand. That as part of this massive transformation across, for example, our energy sector. So I think there's some important things underway, but it's also clear that we don't yet really know how to achieve the reduction and then the elimination of emissions in a way that's really going to work across our society fully. And when I see an unsolved problem like that, that to me is a clarion call for innovation. And OSTP's role, I believe, in this area can be an important one to help find those pathways that make it possible for us to eliminate emissions more rapidly. Again, an area that, if I'm confirmed, I would very much look forward to.
One more question. Manufacturers in Minnesota, they employ about 10% of our workforce. We have a lot of high-tech manufacturing in medical device, robotics, the like. We don't have enough workers right now across the board in our economy. I believe the solution is everything from apprenticeships training. We have a bill on that bipartisan in the committee that I've been leading, as well as immigration reform. Just 30 seconds on that before I turn over to the next colleague.
Thank you, Senator. Again, a super important topic, huge opportunities because of the manufacturing, this rich manufacturing base that we have, and linking people and their skills to those jobs, I think, is a tremendous opportunity. Thank you for the chance to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going in order of people who had appeared. Senator Thune, if he's available. If not, Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Dr. Prabhakar, thank you for the time yesterday to visit over the phone. I want to start right where Senator Klobuchar left off, and that is with the workforce. And I'd love to hear from you how OSTP can be more engaged. Senator Rosen and I have a bipartisan bill that deals with advanced manufacturing. We have the Nashville Tech Council that is setting up talent programs and tech talent programs so that job seekers can gain the skills that they need to work with companies that are coming into the Nashville area, Amazon, Oracle, that is relocating to Nashville. So what role can OSTP play in ensuring that we're focusing on training that skilled workforce that needs to be in place? And then how can you work with the governors and the states to make sure that they are going to be able to take advantage of and coordinate those efforts?
Senator Blackburn, thank you for that question. I enjoyed our visit yesterday, and I really appreciate your leadership on this issue because I think we all know that there are companies that need skilled workers, and there are people who would love to have a chance at these stable, well-paying jobs, and bridging that gap is such a huge opportunity. Over many decades, we've seen state-level efforts that have made strides in that direction, and I think what you're talking about is a terrific example and one I would love to learn more about if I'm confirmed and to help with. The question in my mind is, we have seen many specific examples of these kinds of training programs. Often we're bringing together community colleges and linking them to workers who are displaced or looking for new opportunities and then linking them to the companies. We know this can work, and the question I want to get after is, how do we scale it? How do we make it happen at a level that allows many, many, many millions of workers to achieve these opportunities? So if I'm confirmed, I would absolutely love to work with you on that.
Well, thank you for that. We also chatted a little bit about national labs yesterday, and as you know, Oak Ridge is very important to us in Tennessee for the work that they are doing, the isotope science, the engineering, fusion technology, and fusion energy and supercomputing. And Oak Ridge is home to Frontier, which is the world's fastest supercomputer and the first exascale computer. So under your leadership, how will OSTP work with the national labs like Oak Ridge to make sure that the U.S. remains a world leader on these type of technologies?
Senator, thank you. I think that's an important area. Our national labs are a big part of the U.S. innovation system. It was my privilege to lead one when I was director at NIST. And my experience with the DOE labs goes all the way back to when I was an undergraduate and had the chance to work at and visit some of those facilities. The way I think about how this country achieves huge progress on any area of technology or advances in our industrial capacity or our national security is that it takes all of these different pieces coming together. We need our universities, we absolutely need our national lab system, we need companies, and we need the government agencies that play various roles to play their parts. And a lot of the reason I'm excited about the opportunity to lead OSTP is because that is a place from which we see the entire chessboard. And so I would like very much, if I'm confirmed in this position, to be able to work with the national labs on some of their unique capabilities, but in particular to work with them on how to link them better to the rest of the ecosystem, in particular, often to the commercialization that takes some of those innovations, for example, fusion, and moves it out into the world so that as a society we can really gain the full benefits of their work.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I would add to that list that you just went through deliverables that would focus on near-term capabilities in areas like quantum, as well as a track that some of these near-term deliverables would lead us to some long-term successes and discoveries. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to visiting with you after confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dr. Prabhakar, it is so nice to see you again. I certainly enjoyed working with you when you were at DARPA and really appreciated your visit to the University of Nebraska. In fact, I met with Dr. Gold and some others from the university this morning, and when I said I was coming here and you would most probably be coming back to governmental service, they are thrilled as well. So it is so good to see you. I know when you were at NIST, you were there more as a scientist, and because it was such a technical agency, and the same was true with DARPA, of course. And when you're looking at this new position, if you are confirmed, it's going to have a stronger policy component. So how will you use that technical science background in dealing with this?
Senator Fisher, as always, that's a wonderful question. It's so lovely to see you again, and I've thought about that visit in Nebraska, and I got to reunite with a wonderful old professor of mine and meet a lot of new friends, so it was, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. I love your question because I want to tell you that having served at NIST, having worked in the private sector, having led DARPA, when I left DARPA 5 years ago now, the thought that was in my mind was how privileged I was to participate in science and technology from all of these different perspectives. But then I kept thinking about the problems that we're wrestling with in this century, and it seemed to me that we weren't yet fully stepping up with the innovation that we need, and we've talked about many of the issues here today. And when I started really challenging myself to say, well, how would we innovate to open opportunity for every person and deal with the dark side of the information revolution and deal with our climate challenges and boost the health of people across this country. What you quickly realize when you challenge yourself with a question like that is science and technology is absolutely essential because it opens doors that you never thought were possible. And it's not enough because until you turn it into real change in the world, it doesn't really solve problems for anybody. And it brought me to a view that really caused me to value much more than just the research itself. And of course, every big thing we were ever able to do from NIST or DARPA took the efforts of so many other people. So that is very much the lens that I find I'm bringing as I think about I hope to be able to serve in this role, and that's the lens I would bring. It has to be rooted in what's real and what's not real, scientifically and technically, but then really I think the way you make progress happen is you engage with absolutely everyone who has to be part of the change and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. When you were at DARPA, the Department of Defense was trying to reorient its approach to developing advanced technology, and it was described as the third offset strategy. Some in Congress weren't satisfied with, I guess there wasn't a lot of clarity on what the goals were with the third offset, really what the mission was, if there were any results. It was just hard to be honest, to get some straight answers with that. We saw Many things that I think came out of it, though, looking at China and Russia and the advancements we saw in their technology there, but still, it kind of controversial on what the outcomes were with the third offset. Are there any relevant lessons that you learned in that process that you think would translate back and be able to help you in your leadership in this new position?
I'm having a flashback, Senator, as you're talking about the third offset strategy. It's been 5 years since I left the national security world. That hasn't been a focus in my efforts since then. If I'm confirmed for this job, one of the things I'm very interested in is getting back into it. And I think I'm going to feel a little bit like Rip Van Winkle, going away for 5 years and coming back to see where things are. What I will tell you that I think was very important in the thinking that was happening in leadership in the national security community, the Pentagon, both military and civilian leaders at the time that I served at DARPA. I was there 2012 to 17. We were coming through a period of extended ground wars. And as we pulled our heads up, as we collectively as a national security community pulled our heads up, I think people felt that it was a lot like the end of the Vietnam era when we had been so consumed with war, but when we looked around at that time, we realized that the Soviet Union had made very important strides forward and that we had to figure out a new offset strategy. That, of course, was happening in the 70s. Very similarly, when we looked around in the mid-teens, what we saw was an incredibly powerful China that had surged forward. We saw globally available technologies and a kind of connectivity that we hadn't really ever imagined before. The world had really changed in that time that we had been involved with Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was the genesis of the third offset strategy. And I think we all agree that we have to find a very different way to deal with the emerging threat in China. So that was what was behind it. My personal view was that while there were very specific weapon systems and military capabilities that would be critically important, hypersonics is an area that we've talked about a lot, those absolutely have to be advanced, and we need the leadership there. But my particular concern, and a lot of what we tried to bring to the table from DARPA, was the idea that instead of just moving to a new fixed capability for military technologies, we needed to get on an escalator so that we were always continually getting better, because the world doesn't stand still, and everyone has access to leading edge component technologies. And it's a very different, I think, in my view, it needs to be a very different way of thinking about this next offset. So those are some 5-year-old ideas, and if I'm confirmed, I would very much look forward to updating with you on as I get current again.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Capito. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome. Thank you for being with us today and your willingness to serve. Two quick, will you commit to helping me work on these issues? Senator Coons, Collins, Klobuchar, and I we were able to pass the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act as part of NDAA in FY21. The Office of Science and Technology Policy announced their request for information from the public on a consensus definition of what sustainable chemistry is. So quick action would be good. I've just asked that we could work on this together. And if you might have some perspectives on what that definition might, how that might clarify some of the direction that you'd like to go.
Senator Capito, it's wonderful to meet you, and I look forward to diving into some of those issues with you. Thank you for your leadership in that area. If I'm confirmed, that's an area I would very much like to learn a great deal more about and would be very happy to work with you on it.
Thank you, thank you. And we also, West Virginia is home to a number of scientific facilities. We have the NSF's Green Bank Telescope Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia. We have NOAA's supercomputer. We also have great NASA facilities, and we also have NETL. So the reason I think it's important, and I think this was part of the substance of what we've talked about in the CHIPS Act and the ancillary commerce title that's with that, is there are seeds of excellence all around the country. And if you look at where a lot of the funding goes for science and research, it goes to 6 states. A third of it goes to, I think, Maryland and either Massachusetts or California. We happen to believe we have some great, I don't think we're ever going to be able to build these seeds of excellence in other states if we don't start recognizing, A, that the talent is there, but B, that in order for the talent to stay there, you have to have the encouragement and some of that has to come from the federal government. I don't know if you have an experience in other areas besides what would be considered, the more highly funded areas. Have you ever done research in and around the country that might lend some helpful ideas along this line?
Senator Capito, my thoughts on that subject are informed by my personal experience, which I mentioned earlier. I was an undergraduate at Texas Tech University, and the window I got into research, because they didn't have a lot of research funding, this is many decades ago, but that window that I got because they had a little bit of research funding was something that really opened horizons for me. And so I share your commitment to making sure, for two reasons. Number one, I think reaching these amazing talents that are in every part of our country is vitally important. Because it's fair for those kids to have those shots at STEM jobs. If that's what calls to them, we want them to come. But also because we've got hard problems that need talents of all sorts, and I think that reach is important. So I think there are a number of very practical steps. I hope there will be some really helpful progress, as I know you all are in the middle of wrestling with legislation in that area, but that's an area that I would look forward to working with you on if I'm confirmed.
Well, thank you. That would be much welcomed. And one of the areas that a lot of us have worked on is to try to get involvement in STEM careers. Both women and people of color were underrepresented in these areas. So I'm glad to see that this is a passion, obviously your life's work. And I mean, from my perspective, it's, you got to start early. You've got to talk about what does it really mean. It doesn't mean you're sitting in a lab coat with a beaker and a Bunsen burner or whatever it is we had back in the 70s. There's all kinds of wonderful opportunities, and particularly in the robotics area. Do you have any original ideas or any new ideas to reach those underrepresented populations that are presently underrepresented in the STEM fields?
I think, to me, this is something that's going to take a lot of different measures. Some of them can be legislative, about reaching into different kinds of organizations and reaching into states that haven't had as much participation. I think a lot of this is going to happen one-on-one. Just the idea that a young kid, a black girl who's born into a household that doesn't have a lot of resources, when she sees people who look like her holding positions where they get to do really exciting, worthwhile work, that's the kind of thing that really changes how a child imagines where they might go. And I think that different aspects of this enterprise call to different people. There are people who are drawn to the discovery and wonder of science. And I think for a lot of people, and certainly for me, what drew me was just this powerful notion that you could make the world work better. And there's so many problems that I think young people today really care about solving, whether it's about health, about our climate and energy systems, whether it's about opening opportunity to everybody. And when we can tie these innovative efforts in science and technology to these real changes, I think it draws just a host of really important and exciting new entrants.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Capito. Senator Peters.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Prabhakar, it's wonderful to see you, and congratulations on your nomination for this critically important position. Dr. Prabhakar, when we last spoke, I mentioned how Pfas contamination and exposure is continuing to harm residents and communities across Michigan as well as across the country. Unfortunately, federal research efforts have been fragmented at various federal agencies and have struggled to effectively address just the full scope of the challenges that are presented by these PFAS substances. Certainly much continues to remain unknown about the toxicity, human and environmental health effects, exposure pathways, as well as ways to effectively remove and treat exposure and destruction methods of PFAS substances, as well as some of the alternatives that are out there. That's why I introduced a bill, the Federal PFAS Research Evaluation Act, which is co-sponsored by Senators Moran and Shaheen. And it would direct a study by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to better help inform decisions by the federal government, state governments, industry, and other stakeholders on how we actually address PFAS substances It would also require the OSTP to submit to Congress an implementation plan for increased collaboration and coordination of federal research, federal development, and demonstration activities with respect to PFAS substances. So my question for you, ma'am, is if confirmed, will you commit to working with my office to ensure that we have the strongest possible level of coordination within the federal government to address PFAS?
Senator Peters, thank you for the question. I enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you last week. Thank you for your leadership on this particular topic. We've got a long history in this country of identifying problems like this, and just to your point, doing the research, understanding what's really going on, figuring out how to deal with it and how to fix it, and then implementing that. And it does take many different agencies. It takes many different kinds of researchers. And I think it's a classic example of an area where the kind of coordination that OSTP does can be extremely valuable. So this is an area that I would love to learn more about if I'm confirmed, and I would very much look forward to working with you on it.
Great. We'll look forward to doing that if confirmed. I've also previously authored legislation to establish a regulatory framework to facilitate the safe testing and the deployment of autonomous vehicles. It is the AV START Act, and working with Senator Thune from the committee as well in a bipartisan way. This act is essential to developing and manufacturing autonomous vehicles domestically, as well as achieving the safety and mobility benefits that they offer. Manufacturing autonomous vehicles in the U.S. will also help commercialize AI research, which will boost the flow of resources to support critical areas of scientific inquiry. But achieving this goal is going to absolutely require a focused effort across the number of federal agencies, including with support from leaders at the White House, such as yourself. So, Dr. Prabhakar, when we last spoke, our conversation touched on this issue, and that of automation and artificial intelligence, certainly much more broadly. But my question to you is, if confirmed, will you commit to working with me on promoting the safe testing and deployment of autonomous vehicles in the U.S., as well as supporting AI research that will be absolutely vital to a growing industry, not just in the auto sector, but across the country in a variety of industries?
Senator Peters, thank you for this topic. I enjoyed talking with you about it earlier. The answer is yes, absolutely. I would welcome that opportunity if I'm confirmed. I'd like to say that I find people talk about autonomous vehicles from many different perspectives. For a lot of researchers, it's a very exciting technological development. It's a market opportunity for companies. At the end of the day, the most fundamental question, though, is the one you're talking about, which is safety. And the hope, and the reason a lot of people are working in that area is the hope that it can help, that autonomy can help reduce traffic fatalities. And I think that prospect is important, very tantalizing. And of course, at the same time, until we prove it and until we understand it, because the safety implications will be different in these autonomous scenarios, if we don't really have that safety, then we don't have it. And so I very much support and appreciate the work that you're doing in that area. It's something I would love to work with you on if I'm confirmed.
Well, I will certainly look forward to working with you if confirmed on it. It is critical. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Dr. Prabhakar, I think I'll ask my questions now. And for members, we had a couple of people who are expected, so if members are either on their way or on their way to a remote question, please do so soon. Otherwise, our hearing will conclude early. Dr. Prabhakar, I wanted to, this elevation of OSTP to the cabinet level gives a unique opportunity for a scientist to play a larger role in shaping the public policies of the nation. And I'm a big fan of, we live in a technology-driven economy, and so we need to have people, in my mind, all aspects of our government who, I'm a little down on the CEOs of companies who also aren't science-based. They don't know what the next engineering evolution is going to be. They try to run it on a Wall Street basis, and I guarantee you that's not a recipe for success. There's just so much transformation happening. If you don't have a scientist or an engineer at the top of the ranks, you're not gonna see the next move. So how do you sit at the cabinet level and see the next move and communicate that across government? And let me give you an example. I'm very interested in what we do next on cybersecurity. I feel like the amount of attacks are just escalating. It's really a way of intimidation, if nothing else, by foreign governments. And the consequences could be devastating to our economy. And yet, probably every committee in the Congress has had a hearing on cybersecurity. So how do you play a role? What do you think that we should do to get a more whole-of-government response on cybersecurity, and what can the Office of Science and Technology Policy do at the cabinet level to assure that that happens?
Madam Chair, thank you for this question, because I think that's a question that's been very much on my mind as I've thought about what this role will be if I'm confirmed. I had the great honor of being in the Oval Office with the President to talk about this position and to have him say to me that the reason he had made this position a cabinet level role was because he viewed the role of science and technology in our country and in the future to be so vitally important that he thought it needed to be elevated. And that just moved and delighted me, because I see that in everything that we're doing. In my private sector experience, I very much had the experience that you're describing about managing to Wall Street, which is very different than managing into the future and driving a future that we really want to create. The reason I think that that connection of science and technology at the cabinet level can actually be very effective is because science and technology opens doors, but by itself it can't do anything. And it's implementation, it's acceptance, it's adoption, it's the way science and technology changes the way we operate, the way our incentives are established, the way our organizations work. That's when change really happens. And I think cybersecurity is in many ways a perfect example, because when I think about the challenge of cybersecurity, we have this growing attack surface. For decades now, it has felt as if the problem is getting worse faster than we can keep up with it. And when I think about that, I see two complementary facets of dealing with it. One will always be the research that gives us better methods and more automated, more effective methods to be more secure. But without the other half, which is the implementation, we're simply not going to get there. And how many times have you seen a report of a cybersecurity problem where, when you peel it back, that organization should have patched something or they should have had a different procedure in place? It's not that they didn't know, it's that they didn't have sufficient incentives, or they weren't worrying about it as much as they should have. And so these implementation issues are where I think that's where the rubber meets the road for science and technology. And my hope is, and what I would work towards if I'm confirmed in this position, is to use that cabinet position to link science and technology to the other aspects of government that so often are where a lot of the important implementation steps happen.
What do you think, that's like a roadmap? Do you think that's a plan? I was a big fan, a very geeky report done by then Secretary Moniz called the Quadrennial Review.
Yes, wonderful report.
And that kind of report says, this is where we are as a nation. These are the things that we should go and implement as it related to energy. And basically it was talking about the transformation that was happening, that we no longer had the same structure even. We didn't even have the same structure to deliver what we previously had. So I think that, in my mind, we have a lot of great efforts going on in cybersecurity, but it's not as cohesive as a strategic plan, or certainly not a constant review. So I think so you're saying you think that OSTP could play that role?
Yes, I think those reports can sometimes be extremely impactful. The one you described is a great example. And then I think you also have to couple it with the direct persuasion and the finding of ways to implement. And that's sometimes, as you know, that's a very human enterprise, and I think that's something that my hope is the cabinet position would give me an opportunity to be more effective than science and technology has been in the past on that side of it.
Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Dr. Prabhakar. Welcome. It's always good to see a fellow Texan before the committee. My first question for you is a pretty simple one. Do you believe there is such a thing as, quote, settled science? That being a time when scientific inquiry is no longer required, when questioning is no longer required, when experimentation is no longer necessary?
Senator Cruz, it's good to meet you. Thank you for that question. The enterprise of science is one of inquiry, and over time there are fields where the scientific consensus emerges. It's been tested under a broad set of circumstances, and it starts to feel immutable. It never really fully is, but that is the nature of scientific inquiry, is to continue to ask those questions and to examine any topic from all perspectives.
Well, I agree with that, particularly the last point you just made, that it is the essence of science to question. And history is replete with all sorts of instances of, quote, scientific consensus being categorically wrong. And the mantra of settled science is often a mask for a political agenda to prevent scientists from asking questions that are inconsistent with the political agenda. We know that it was once settled science that the Earth was the center of the universe, and Galileo was a heretic for daring to question otherwise. It was settled science less than 200 years ago that hand washing did nothing to prevent the spread of disease, that everyone knew disease was caused by an imbalance of bad air or evil spirits. And so settled science has a way of shifting, and I would note just a couple of months ago, the Biden administration's Assistant Secretary for Health, Rachel Levine, all but said that the science surrounding, quote, gender-affirming care was, quote, settled, specifically, and the quote was, quote, there is no debate in the medical community about the medical or scientific validity of gender-affirming care. And gender-affirming care is a euphemism for all sorts of policies that with young children can involve puberty-blocking drugs, that can involve, at extreme levels, surgeries that permanently alter their reproductive capacity, their capacity for the rest of their life. Do you think it's accurate that questions such as that are settled science and no one is even allowed to ask, what are the consequences of an 8-year-old child being given severe drugs that alter their physiology for the rest of their life?
Senator Cruz, I think you are talking about an area that is quite complex. I think gender is actually, I think, complex in ways that are surprising to many people. And my view on this matter is that fundamental to this topic is respect for the individuals who are involved. And I would keep coming back to that as
okay, but you're not answering my question. Do you believe it is settled science and thus it is unacceptable to ask questions about the impact of a child of administering severe, life-altering drugs at very young ages? Do you think that is settled science and nobody is allowed to question it?
Senator, that's an area that's, again, very complex. It's not one that I have deep personal familiarity with. It's one that I would want to learn a lot more about.
Okay, so you're refusing to answer that. But like, it ought to be really easy. Of course, you can ask questions about what's the impact of giving life-altering drugs to kids. That is not a complicated. I can tell you, if I go home to Texas and I get 100 people in a room, I promise you 99 of them will say, well, of course we ought to ask a question about that. I find it amazing that you're nominated to be a cabinet-level position as the president's science advisor, and you're not even willing to acknowledge that asking questions about the long-term physical and emotional health to a child, asking those questions is okay.
Senator, I think you're talking about some issues that certainly require a lot more thought and
okay, unfortunately, what you're demonstrating here is that politics is more important than science because there are obvious science and medical questions. Let's shift to another topic. OSTB has done a lot of work under President Biden on energy and climate, and there may be no area of science that is more politicized than energy and climate. Of the almost 200 nations on planet Earth, which nation has reduced its CO2 emissions by the greatest number of total tons over the last 15 years?
Senator Cruz, I would probably want to look at the data to give you a complete answer to that. I know the U.S. has been very good at reducing our emissions after having a long history of being the greatest emitter.
Okay,
as
the complete
wealthiest
answer
country
is
in
the United
world.
States of America, which has reduced our CO2 emissions by more than 600 million metric tons in the past 15 years. And my last question, because my time has expired, what is the principal cause of the United States leading the world in the reduction of CO2 emissions? And there is an objectively correct answer to this.
Senator, from my recollection of looking at the shifts in U.S. emissions, they have come about, I believe, from a combination of efficiency improvements, of shifts in manufacturing, and of the adoption of renewables.
Okay, that answer is scientifically false. The answer for the principal cause of the reduction of CO2 emissions is the substitution of natural gas for coal in the production of electricity. That is objective, it is scientific fact, and it is dismaying to me that your answer to this committee is the political answer rather than actually talking about science and data and facts. And it also explains why the Biden administration has a relentless hostility to natural gas, even though it is the principal driver of carbon reductions. That is not science, that is politics, and frankly, it's bad politics.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Chair Cantwell, and thank you, Dr. Prabhakar, for being here. And I'm just so proud of you as a first woman to earn a PhD in applied physics from the California Institute of Technology, where you also earned a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering, and you're here today to talk to us about good, strong science and technology policy. So I thank you for being here, and I thank the chairwoman for bringing you. I also want to agree with the chairwoman. I'm not going to talk about this today, but how cyber security is so important and should be part of our national strategy. But in order to do that, we have to have access for STEM education. So one of my top priorities in Congress is supporting STEM education in the STEM workforce, being a woman in STEM myself. And it's why I launched with Senator Capito the Bipartisan Senate Women in STEM Caucus. I'm proud to have introduced several STEM-related bills, including my STEM Restart Act with Senator Hyde-Smith, my Rural STEM Act with Senator Wicker, and the Building Blocks of STEM Act with Senator Capito, which was signed into law last Congress. However, there is still so much work to be done, particularly in breaking down barriers that stand in the way of all students, of all ages and genders and backgrounds from pursuing STEM education and STEM careers. We know that there are jobs everywhere. Like I said, proud that you were the first woman to break that barrier there. So what role do you see OSTP having promoted STEM education and workforce training, particularly for girls and for underrepresented communities? And if you're confirmed, will you commit to working to increase our nation's investment in those education programs for girls and students of color?
Senator, thank you for your question, and thank you for the enormous amount of work that you've done on this vitally important topic. As we've been discussing today, I see two big reasons that this wider participation in STEM is just critically important. We've made enormous progress since I was an undergraduate in the 70s, and when I look around and I start to see many more people of color, people from all different backgrounds, many more women, I can see that we're making progress, and it's also clear we've got a long way to go, and the work that you're doing, I think, is important in that. This is a process that accelerates, I think, as there are more and more role models, people who look like you when you're a kid. I think that's enormously beneficial. But progress here comes in many different forms, and I know that improving STEM opportunities and improving our STEM workforce is something that is part of I've seen it as part of what many different parts of the federal R&D enterprise does. And historically, and I believe continuing, OSTP plays a role in pulling all of those pieces together and helping to make sure that they really are fully effective. So if I'm confirmed, this is an area that I would look forward to working with you on.
Thank you, because you know what? These are good jobs. They're really creative jobs. They're jobs for everyone. But what do you need to do all these cyber jobs, tech jobs, STEM jobs, whether they're education, programming, research, development, you name it, engineering? You need broadband. You need broadband. And so last year, Congress passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I was proud to help write part of that bill, drafting key portions of the law, including my Middle Mile Broadband Deployment Act. It's part of that $40 billion broadband equity access and deployment program to invest in last mile infrastructure. And so I know I have a short time left, but I do believe by investing in these high-speed networks, especially for our anchor institutions across the country, we could see greater participation in science from our rural communities. So, Doctor, although broadband I know isn't part of OSTP's directive, the office's mission is to maximize the benefits of science and technology for all Americans, including rural Americans, underserved communities. We have those all across the country. So greater broadband access really can bring us closer to realizing the agency's mission, your mission. So can you discuss the importance of closing the digital divide and what role perhaps your office can play in working with the FCC, NTIA, USDA, and all of that to make this happen?
Senator, I couldn't agree more. It's, you really can't you can't educate kids, you can't operate businesses without that broadband access. That's the world that we're in. The issues are different, as I understand them, for different communities. And I think that's a reason that I think OSTP can, in fact, play a very constructive role working with the different parts of government that are responsible for different parts of that. I think it's fundamentally enabling, and it's something that I would really be delighted to work with you on if I'm confirmed.
Thank you. I think we just need a whole of government approach to create the foundation for success, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Prabhakar, thank you so much for your, there you are, there I am. Thank you so much for your willingness to come back again and again into public service and to look at the opportunities that surround us in terms of getting more return for our investments with our scientific research. And I thought Senator Rosen's questions about getting more women, people of color into science are so powerful just because, I mean, science, in its way, science allows us by fostering our curiosity and through careful observation, are able to make significant progress in solving the problems that face mankind. And while science probably is never always settled, at a certain point you make decisions and we have to go forward with the science we know. And still, if new information comes, we have to be willing to admit that and change. But with the information we have to go forward. And I think that's something you've done all through your career. I think that your experience with DARPA, your experience with NIST, and your experience in the private world have kind of prepared you for helping create a bigger vision of what science can mean. And within that, I recognize that science without values, without a framework of values, can be dangerous. And that's part of our job, is to make sure your job and my job and the Senate's job is to make sure that framework is strong. How does your experience, both in NIST and DARPA, how does it allow you, and describe a little bit about what that bigger vision for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is? When we had a chance to discuss, I don't know whether you got me more excited or I got you more excited, but it was that excitement was real, and I think it's really meaningful. So talk a little bit about what that, in terms of getting rid of duplicative research, things like that, what you see.
Senator Hickenlooper, I really enjoyed our conversation. I remember hands were waving and a lot was going on. I just feel so lucky that at this stage in my career, I've had the opportunity, the NIST opportunity, the DARPA opportunity, but also my private sector experience. And it's given me a lot of different windows into this very complex, rich ecosystem that we have for innovation. And the first thing I would observe about that is all the big progress we've ever made in any area comes not because, we love the lone hero story in American mythology, but the fact is it really does take all these different components. And what I learned from DARPA and NIST in particular is the number one thing for the organization to succeed is to really be clear about their mission. The people you bring in, how you organize, the culture you build is all about that mission. And I found at DARPA and NIST they were very, very different. They both have very important national purposes. One is breakthroughs for national security. The other is this measurement and standards infrastructure that supports everything. At DARPA, the favorite word is risk. At NIST, I found the favorite word was careful. And you really have to understand how important each of those are and then let each organization be really great at what it is they do, which both of those are. So now when I think about that, when I now think about, I hope, the opportunity, if I'm confirmed, to come in and lead OSTP, OSTP is a place that sees that whole chessboard. And one thing I want to do is respect and honor those different missions. And then I want to knock down barriers to help those different parts of our federal R&D enterprise achieve those missions. And I want to knit them together so that they can do the things together that they can't do separately. And that's a lot of that focus will be the federal R&D enterprise, but of course it's part of our national and then our global innovation system. And that is the lens I would tell you I bring, is that we need each piece to flourish, and if big things are going to happen, we need it all to work together as well.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to it. I think Chairwoman Cantwell has been a great leader in the Congress in terms of how do we put more energy into our science and get more out of it. In other words, how do we, at the same time we're expanding curiosity and whole new frontiers, how do we take the innovations and the ideas that we've proven out and make them more beneficial? And I think that's one of the most exciting things about you going into that office is that's where that can happen, where we can, as a country, reassert our leadership on the global stage as a place where not only is there great research and new ideas and just the purity of research is unfettered, but we're also a place where we take those ideas and put them into action, which is something you've been working on, those building blocks for such a long time. So
that's what I really care about, Senator, so thank you.
Well, I can tell, and I'm as excited. I'm not sure I'm quite as excited as you are, but I'm darn close. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. I'm going to ask Senator Tester, if no one else shows up, if you could close out the hearing. I have to run to another very important finance hearing on low-income housing, so I'm going to submit more questions for the record.
Thank you.
Definitely on some of the other science areas we didn't cover. Definitely we'll touch on ethics and conflict of interest and all those things that are important for us to continue to build confidence in the systems that we have in place. But thank you very much. And Senator Tester, you're up. And if you could help us close out if no one else
Thank you,
shows
Madam
up,
Chair. I would be honored to close out as long as your crack staff gives me a script that I could rip through at the end. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Doctor, thank you for your willingness to serve. OSTP leads the climate and environmental team. You correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. It provides the administration with scientific information on climate and environmental issues to help inform their policies. Is the work that you do analyzing what's already happened within the climate, or do you do anything, and I'm not being judgmental, I think it's very important to do analysis of what happened after, or do you do anything saying, we need to do this because that result would end up in this, okay?
Senator Tester, it's wonderful to meet you. I hope to have an opportunity to talk in greater detail another time. Thank you for that question. The work in climate and environment and our energy systems, as I understand it, has a couple of divisions at OSTP with two really exceptional leaders. Part of that work, as again, I'm only seeing it from the outside at this point, but part of that work is a clear understanding of where we are, where emissions come from at a fine-grained enough level that we can take action. And so part of it is understanding, and then the other part is what are the actions that will actually get us to a place where we can maintain the devastations of climate change. So it's both components, okay, as far as I understand it.
So as I said in caucus yesterday, I think there's two ways to attack climate, and there may be more. One is either through regulation or one is through getting technology out to that's so affordable that business can't afford not to have vehicles, or pick an industry that doesn't put a lot of carbon out in the atmosphere. As you probably know, I'm probably a little more in the camp of the latter rather than the former. And, you know, climate is a huge issue, and I think in the end, the real problem isn't runways melting in England. It's there's not going to be enough food to feed the world. No matter how good our science is, there's still not going to be enough good food. And let me give you an example. Where I live in north central Montana, which is the Golden Triangle, which is an incredible wheat belt, I've just heard from folks at the universities that says if things continue, this is going to have to be put back into grass because you're not going to have enough water to raise crops, okay? That kind of worries me, since that's been my family's life for generations. So the question is can you tell me how you could use your position to leverage technology? Or can you use your position to leverage technology?
Senator Tester.
That deals with climate change, by the way.
Yes, absolutely. I think I very much appreciate the way you framed it, because we tend to talk about technologies as these exciting new, wonderful ways to solve problems, but you've really put your finger on a very important piece, which is better technologies lower the barrier to make the shift into the carbon-free future that we have to have. And so I think that, and you know, every big thing we've ever accomplished did require a combination of regulation and advances in technology that ultimately allowed the market to just drive and scale.
Correct.
So I think those are the transitions that we really need to get to, and I think that there are opportunities underway and new opportunities that research can provide.
Do you see your office as playing a role in that?
Yes.
As far as those recommendations go? Because, look, we can all look and say, you know what, the polar ice cap is melting, and we can all say that, you know, you had the driest year ever, or the hottest year ever, the ocean's rising so much. But I think we are where we are, and solutions are really important. Do you see your office as playing a role in recommending solutions to the White House, to the agencies, to Congress?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, that is very much what my focus will be, practical solutions. And my impression from, again, just a brief introduction so far, is that's very much the approach that the people who are in those roles are taking today.
As I started out my questions, I appreciate your willingness to serve. I hope you're confirmed. I hope you've done by unanimous consent, so we don't have to mess around and take days and days to do these confirmations, but we will see what happens. With that, I'll recognize Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Prabhakar, congratulations on your nomination, and it's a really important position. And I think our country needs to get back to trusting science, right? There's a lot on both sides of the aisle who kind of claim, oh, they're the party of science, and I think we just got to go with the facts and the science, and you're going to be critical in that perspective. You know, there's the International Arctic Research Center is the result of strong international scientific collaborations as it relates to the Arctic. And one of the things that frustrates us a little bit in Alaska is you have Arctic research that seems almost purposely not to take place in the Arctic. And we think that it should take place in the Arctic. So will you help us prioritize Arctic science, of which there's a lot, and a lot of interest, actually taking place in Alaska that has great research institutions that in my mind are some of the best in the world, and live it. They live it. Yeah. And this is both our university systems, but also our native people who have traditional knowledge on Arctic issues and science that maybe isn't the Western PhD knowledge, but time and time again is proven to be, in many ways, smarter and more predictable as it relates to Arctic science. So can I get your commitment on that, and do you have any views on both those issues that I raised?
Senator Sullivan, it's wonderful to meet you. I look forward to a chance to dive in deeper with you. I think we're scheduled to meet later. Thank you for this issue. Thank you for the work that you've done in this area. You do have my commitment. I wanted to say that when I served at DARPA, I became aware of the issues in the Arctic and the changing nature of the Arctic. And of course, at that time, I was thinking about it from a national security lens, huge implications from national security perspectives, but it's much broader than that. And this is an area that if I'm confirmed, I would want to learn a great deal more about. I very much appreciate your emphasis on local knowledge, which seems critical to a problem like this.
Critical. Good. Let me turn to the issue of the energy sector, oil and gas, and then I want to talk about emissions. I'll start with the emissions. I have this chart that I like to trot out a lot. And take a look at that. This has been fact-checked, but you know there's a movement on some of the climate issues to say, all right, well, we're just going to get rid of all hydrocarbons, right? I think John Kerry reflects that the best in this administration. It's very non-scientific based. There's no country in the world that has gone from, for example, power generation by coal to wind and solar. No one's done that in the world. No major economy in the world has done that, right? The transition has been generally coal-fired power generation to natural gas. And no country in the world exhibits that more than us. And what that does, it has actually benefited the world in terms of emissions. What do I mean by that? Take a look at this chart. These are facts. The U.S. is the leader since 2005 on reducing emissions, almost by 15%. That's a fact. Okay, as you know, India, China, I mean, these countries are going through the roof on emissions. When I ask very knowledgeable people, and you're one, why do you think that happened? Why do you think that happened? Why are we the leader for the last 15 years? You never read about it in the press, but we are. More than Europe, more than Japan, more than Germany, certainly more than China and India. Do you have an answer? Do you know why that happened? You think it was comprehensive, smart EPA regulations that made that happen?
Senator, I had the opportunity to have an exchange on this matter with Senator Cruz a few minutes ago.
Okay.
And he reminded me that natural gas had played a critical role.
Critical.
And
critical.
And I was remembering the chart that I know from the EIA that addresses exactly that issue, and I'm happy to discuss that further with you.
Okay, so you know then the reason this chart and the reason we're the leader in the world by far, John Kerry, take note, is because of the revolution in the production of American clean-burning natural gas. Isn't that correct?
Senator Sullivan, that is an important contribution.
You're going to be the top scientist in America. You need to know the answer to that question.
That is an important contribution. I would like to add that it's not the only component
It's not the only one,
in that
but
progress.
it's the driving factor.
And I would also like to note, if I might, that again, back to the point that as we learn more things, we need to adapt. I think what we're learning now about some of the concerns about natural gas and leakage issues actually puts in question how much of a contribution we've made. So I don't want to take anything away
like
from
John
that
Kerry,
contribution.
Which is not, seriously, this is a serious issue, right? And I don't, the John Kerry talking point on leakage, you know, the guy's not a scientist. You're a scientist, right? You need to be able to answer this question, right? This is primarily because of the production of natural gas in America. That is a fact, okay? You're a scientist. You can't quibble and give me the John Kerry answer about leakage. And so there is leakage. I'm not saying there isn't. But the reason we're the leader in the world is the production of natural gas. And the reason I'm mentioning this, the world's going to need more American natural gas, particularly in the aftermath of the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Our allies in Europe, our allies in Asia need it. We need to be able to say that strategically. You're from DARPA, but then also say, and there will be benefits from global emissions that relate to that. If every country in the world had this profile, you think the world would have a better chance on reducing emissions?
Senator, there's no question that the great growth, a lot of that is from coal-fired plants. And I want to be very clear that I think it is important to acknowledge the role that natural gas has played. So I do agree with you on that. And again, in my view, having a complete understanding of all the components is important because I think we all understand that those emissions come from every sector of our economy. You and I are talking right now primarily about electricity, but there's a lot more that's going on. So I want to affirm your point about natural gas, but I'd also like to put down a marker that I think there are many other dimensions of this very complex challenge.
There's no doubt there are other dimensions, but the driving force here. Mr. Chairman, if I can ask one more question, and it's an important one. We want to make sure in my state on resource development, again, science and data are critical. Alaska, for example, we're the superpower of seafood. Almost 2/3 of all seafood harvested in America comes from Alaska's waters, 2/3. And we do that because we have the best data and science on managing our fish stocks. Sometimes it takes discipline to tell fishermen, hey, you can't fish here, you got to limit your harvest. So I just want you to commit to me on continuing to make sure we get data on that, but also data in the energy sector. We have an area called the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. A couple years ago, White House officials, scientific officials in the Obama administration came out and said, there's no more real oil in NPRA. I was the DNR commissioner at the time. We knew that was a factually inaccurate statement. So you had science from a White House being used on energy that was clearly politicized, right? How do I know that was wrong? Because that part of Alaska is seeing a huge renaissance in exploration and discovery of massive amounts of energy that we have in America that we need. So I just want your commitment to make sure we're not going to politicize science in any way, shape, or form, particularly as it relates to energy, oil, gas, fishing, climate change, straight up on science. Can you give me that commitment? I look forward to having a further discussion in my office on these.
Senator, yes, I will commit to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. And one last question, and that is, Dr. Prabhakar, will you commit to respond to requests to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Senate?
Senator Chester, I do.
Okay, perfect. That everybody on the committee, especially the chairman and ranking member, will be happy to hear that. This concludes this hearing this morning, and I want to thank you for appearing for the committee today and for your continued commitment to public service and making this world a better place. Senators will have until Monday, July 25th at the close of business to submit questions for the record to the committee. You will have until close of business on August 1st to respond to those questions. With that, this committee is adjourned.
Thank you.
Boom.